What's up guys, welcome back to Grant's Info Stop. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you all about how to color grade in Final Cut Pro. If you find it difficult to color grade, then this is the video for you because I'm going to be giving you tips from the beginner side all the way to advanced tips. So this is a video for everyone. So if you are new here, my name is Ian Form and I give you all of the information about tech that you would ever want to know. Get out your computer with Final Cut Pro and let's get started. So now I have Final Cut Pro pulled up on my computer. So the first thing that I do to clean up my workspace is eliminate the library. So all you have to do is just click on this button. So now that I have my library eliminated, I have more room to work. So right here, I have my playback window. Right here, I have my timeline. Here, I have my adjustment area. And right here, I have my effects window. I sometimes will exit out of that too. And so what I like to do is have my own custom preset for a workspace. So I just go into Window, Workspaces, and then I named it color grading. So right here I have my timeline and I made it a little bit smaller because you don't really use it that much. And then right here is my adjustment menu and I enlarged it. All you have to do is just double click the top piece. And that was a feature that I just found out and I love it. And then right here, I have my scopes. So to find your scopes, go to view and then video scopes. And then I have my RGB overlay. Just go to that little button and then go to channels RGB overlay. And then to save this as a preset, just go to window workspaces and then save workspace as, and then just name it whatever you would like. So once I have my workspace all cleaned up, I always make sure that my color wheels are on. And so just to set this as a preset, just go to Final Cut Pro, Preferences, General, Color Wheels, and then at first it will say color board, but just say color wheels under color correction. And that's how you set it as a preset as well. And so if you notice, this image looks actually pretty good. And so I like to look at my scopes, but I don't base everything off of them just because it can be a little confusing and a little weird at first. And I am sometimes not the best at reading them. And so I think this clip looks pretty good, but to bring up my highlights a little bit, just go to the highlights wheel and bring up this little bar. Bring it up a little bit till it's about 100. And then bring down the shadows just a tiny bit. You don't have to a lot. And so right here I have my master, shadows, highlights, and midtones. And you will definitely need to know these immediately. On the left side of the wheel is your saturation, and on the right side is your exposure of each. And then in the middle is your color correction. Down here is your temperature, tint, and hue. And then you can minor adjust each of these, but I never even open any of these. So since I shot this with my iPhone, it actually looks pretty good. But if I wanted to add a little bit more pop, I can bring up my master saturation. And then I can move my shadows to a different color if I wanted. So I actually like it a little bit more of a magenta color just because it's so green and I just like to even it out a little bit. And you can see that there's so much contrast because you can see the sky and the subject. So let's move on to our next one. We're going to work with what we have. Click on that clip. And first, let's bring down our highlights. The shadows are pretty up there, so let's bring those down a little bit too. This creates contrast, and contrast is just having a broader range of highlights and shadows. Since it's a little bit hard to see my dog, I can bring up the midtones a little bit. I can also bring down the shadows once I do that because it will bring up the shadows a lot, and then you don't want that. You want to have a contrasty image. If you notice, the shadows are very blue. So let's bring our shadows bar away from blue. And if you really crank up the saturation, you will notice the change. And then the highlights, I kind of want it more of a greenish color, but also keeping that blue, so maybe a cyan color. And so I just chose an orangish color, but not up much at all. So if you are having a hard time keeping a good balance on your camera while keeping a good shutter speed, f-stop with the blurry background, and a good ISO, then I think that you need to buy an ND filter, and more specifically, a variable ND filter. A variable ND filter looks just like this, and you can change the tint of it, and it goes darker to a lighter. So if you go online, you will notice that there are many options for a variable ND filter, and you want to buy the largest one possible. And I know I only bought the 77mm filter thread, but I thought that it was a better choice just to choose the 77mm because the 82 was a lot more expensive, and I just didn't really think that was the option to go. With my camera, I have a 55mm filter thread, and I found that you can buy these rings and you can just like break them apart, and they are a lifesaver. And then all I have to do is just screw on the rings and put on the filter, and it is game changing. And then if you buy another lens, then you can just swap out these rings and they work flawlessly. Alright, so we have this bird, and we really want to make that bird pop. And so we can see that the shadows are not as far down as we want them. Bring those down. And then the highlights we need to bring up. And then the midtones, let's bring those up a little bit too. Bring the shadows down a little bit. I don't normally use the temperature slider, but let's just play with it a little bit. Let's go to a warmer tone. And that looks actually pretty good. So if we want to really make this pop, let's bring up our saturation. So for this shot, I was at the beach, and there were amazing videos and shots that I got, but this one just didn't turn out the best. And so it turned out very blue, and I am going to help correct that, and maybe you can learn from that as well. And so since we first know that this image is very blue, let's turn up the temperature to a warmer tone. And already this image looks far better. And so what we can see is that there are not good contrast. And so let's just bring up the midtones and bring down the shadows again, just because it was kind of hard to see my face. And then now we can actually see that the sky is pretty blue, and most of the highlights are very blue. And let's just take the highlights bar to a warmer tone. And this already looks far better, and I am in love with this shot. And you remember at the beginning, I didn't really like this shot, but now that I'm color correcting it, this looks far better. And then let's bring down the shadows to a greener tone, and then we can bring the midtones to a warmer tone so it looks more balanced. Let's actually bring down that a little bit, and let's just bring up the saturation a whole lot. And we can bring this saturation down a little bit in this highlights, but this image looks very good, and I'm very pleased with it. Let's go on to our next one. So for this one, I was at Disney World in the cantina, and I got this really cool video. And the lighting was really cool inside, but I think we can change that and make it a little bit better, and let's just fix that. So let's just even out our contrast at the start. Let's bring up the highlights, and then the shadows are actually at a good spot. Bring up the midtones a little bit. So this looks actually pretty good. So the shadows are pretty orange. We can bring that down to the other end to a blue, and then bring up the highlights to an orange tone since the drink is orange. Let's just make that image look very poppy. And then the midtones maybe to a greener yellow ish. Bring the master saturation up. Pull down the shadows saturation and bring up the mid-tone saturation. But just make sure that the colors don't look blown out, because that is when problems occur. And so when you push an 8-bit image too far, it will start to look very grainy and just start just looking terrible. So if you're enjoying this video so far, then make sure you leave a like and subscribe. It is greatly appreciated and it helps out the channel a whole lot. So let's get back into the video. And this is for the Pandora ride, and I was so excited to ride this ride, and yeah, and so I found this really cool desk and I wanted to take a video of it. And so you can see that the image is still very dark, and let's just bring up those shadows a lot. You can really see everything on the desk. Just make sure that the contrast is very good. So for this shot, I was just wanting to help you learn more about the exposure. So on the scopes, you can see that the highlights are not all the way to 100, but if I went a little bit farther, it would have looked a little grainy, and I wouldn't want that. And I still want to keep the mood and tone of where I was, because you don't want to lose that. You just want to make sure that you can see everything so that the message comes across to the viewer. So for this shot, it's of a cow, and it's at our farm, but the saturation is terrible. We got to fix that right this second. Let's just bring up the saturation a lot, and that just almost fixes our image. I love color grading because you can just see a image come to life. I think that we need to make a minor adjustment with the color, because the shadows look a little green. So the opposite of green is a red magenta color. We just are going to bring our little slider thing to a magenta color. And so now it made the midtones a little pink too, and I don't really want that. And I would rather have it more of a bluish or even an oranger tone. I hope I helped you go from a beginner user all the way to advanced, because now you know most everything about color grading in Final Cut Pro. If you have any more questions about color grading, then leave them in the comment section down below and I will get to every single person. If you enjoyed this video, then click right here to watch other videos just like this, where I give you tips and tricks about all technology. And click right here to watch the video I made last week about my channel name change. And have you subscribed yet? Then click right here and subscribe to my channel so you do not miss any of my upcoming videos that I create. Thanks for stopping in.